The sun was setting on Rodeo Drive, its golden light reflecting off the windows of luxury boutiques. Keanu Reeves, in his signature understated style, walked casually along the sidewalk, dressed in a plain black t-shirt, faded jeans, and sneakers. He looked like any other man out for a stroll, but Keanu had a purpose, a very personal one. He paused in front of a high-end fashion store known for its exclusivity and expensive taste. Through the glass, he saw the perfect item for someone he cared deeply about. A watch that sparkled like a small galaxy under the store lights. Keanu smiled to himself. This would make the perfect gift. He reached for the door handle. It was polished to a mirror finish, but just as he pushed the door open, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "Excuse me, sir," said a young man in a perfectly tailored suit. His tone was polite, but his expression betrayed something else entirely. A mix of judgment and disdain. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Keanu tilted his head, his warm smile unwavering. "I think. So I'm here to buy a gift," he said, gesturing towards the display case. The employee's eyes flicked over Keanu's casual clothes. He raised an eyebrow. "Well, I'm sorry, but this store is very exclusive. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable shopping elsewhere," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. For a moment, Keanu didn't respond. He simply looked at the young man, his gaze calm and measured, then in a tone that was both polite and firm. He asked, "Are you saying I can't shop here because of how I'm dressed?" The employee hesitated. "It's not that, sir. It's just this store caters to a specific clientele. If you don't have an appointment or the means to shop here, we encourage people to look elsewhere. We want everyone to feel comfortable." You know, the unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Keanu didn't belong there, not because of who he was, but because of who the employee assumed him to be. Now imagine you were in Keanu's shoes. How would you feel? Have you ever been judged for how you look or what people assume about you? If you can relate to this moment, comment 1 below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and let's see how many of us have experienced something like this. Keanu's smile faded, but only slightly. He didn't argue or push back. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for letting me know." The employee blinked momentarily, thrown off by Keanu's calm response. He probably expected anger or indignation, but Keanu gave none of that. Keanu turned and walked away, his pace unhurried, but if the employee thought that was the end of it, he was about to be very, very wrong. Keanu walked a few blocks down Rodeo Drive, the glitz of the luxury district casting a peculiar irony over the encounter he'd just experienced. The calmness in his demeanor wasn't a mask Keanu was truly unbothered by. The superficial judgment, however, a seed of reflection had been planted not for himself, but for the countless others who might have faced such dismissive treatment. And walked away, carrying the sting of unearned shame. As he strolled, his thoughts began to form into an idea. Not revenge. No, that wasn't his way, but something more impactful. Something transformative. He wanted to make a point, not just for the young salesperson, but for everyone watching. Keanu Reeves wasn't interested in bruised egos or petty disputes. He was interested in lessons, the kind that left an impression strong enough to ripple outward. Keanu stopped at a small cafe and stepped inside. It was quaint, unassuming, and filled with the comforting hum of casual chatter, ordering a simple black coffee. He found a quiet table by the window, pulling out his phone. He dialed a familiar number. "Hey, it's Keanu," he said. When the call was answered, his tone was calm but carried a hint of purpose. "In need of favor, are you free tomorrow morning?" The person on the other end was clearly curious, but Keanu didn't elaborate. Instead, he simply smiled and said, "You'll see, it's going to be worth it at exactly 10. In the morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the Sam luxury store. A handful of onlookers paused to see who might step out. It wasn't unusual for celebrities to frequent this part of town, but the air of mystery surrounding the vehicle drew attention. The door opened and Keanu stepped out. This time he was dressed in a tailored black suit that fit him perfectly, exuding quiet confidence. The transformation was subtle, yet unmistakable. Behind him, a small entourage of assistants and a cameraman followed. Keanu entered the store, his presence commanding attention without effort. The young salesperson from the day before was standing near the counter, chatting with a colleague. At first he didn't recognize Keanu, but as Keanu approached, the salesperson's face paled, the recognition dawning in his wide eyes. "Good morning," Keanu said, his voice steady and polite. "I believe we met yesterday," the salesperson stammered, his words tripping over themselves. "Oh, yes sir, I didn't realize. I'm so sorry about." Keanu raised a hand, silencing the apologies with an almost imperceptible gesture. "No need for that," he said gently. "I'm not here to dwell on yesterday. I'm here because I think there's an opportunity for us all to learn something." The store's manager appeared, having been alerted by the sudden buzz of activity, a middle-aged woman with an air of authority. She approached Keanu with a professional smile, clearly unaware of the previous day's events. "Mr. Reeves, welcome," she said. "It's an honor to have you here. How can we assist you today?" Keanu's smile returned, soft and unassuming. "Thank you. I'd like to make a purchase, but before I do, I think it's important to address something that happened." Yesterday, the room went silent. The salesperson's discomfort was palpable, and the manager's brow furrowed in concern. "Yesterday, I came in here, dressed like I always do when I'm not working, comfortably, casually, and I was told in not so many words that I didn't belong." Here Keanu's tone remained calm, but his words carried weight. "I was judged for how I looked, not for who I am, and while I can shrug that off, I know many people might not be able to." The manager's face flushed. "I'm terribly sorry to hear that, Mr. Reeves. Please believe me when I say this doesn't reflect our company's values." Keanu held up a hand again, stopping her mid-sentence. "I'm not here to shame anyone. I understand that assumptions happen, but it's how we respond to those assumptions that defines us." Turning to the salesperson, Keanu offered a kind smile. "I know you probably didn't mean any harm. You were doing what you thought was right, based on the standards you've been taught, but I want to challenge those standards." He gestured toward the door where more people had gathered, curious about the commotion. "Every person who walks through that door deserves to be treated with respect, whether they're wearing a suit or a t-shirt, carrying a design, a bag, or nothing at all. They all matter. You never know who someone is or what they're capable of. And honestly, that shouldn't even matter. Treating people with dignity shouldn't depend on what they can do for you." The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. The salesperson nodded, his eyes downcast. "You're right," he said softly. "I'm sorry for how I treated you yesterday." Keanu smiled, his expression warm. "Apology accepted. But remember, it's not about me, it's about everyone who comes through here." Keanu turned to the manager now about that purchase. "I'd like to buy every single watch in that display case." The manager blinked, clearly taken aback. "All of them?" "Yes," Keanu said with a nod. "And I'd like them delivered to several charities I support. There are people who could use them far more than I ever could." The manager quickly composed herself and nodded. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, we'll make the arrangements right away." As Keanu turned to leave, he stopped and looked back at the salesperson. "Thank you for yesterday," he said. "It gave me a chance to remind myself and hopefully others that kindness costs nothing, but it means everything." With that, Keanu stepped outside, greeted by a growing crowd. He waved briefly before getting into the SUV, the door closing softly behind him. As Keanu's SUV disappeared down the street, the luxury boutique was left in stunned silence, the manager still reeling from the moment. Turned to the salesperson. "You realize how lucky you are, don't you?" she said, her voice sharp but laced with a touch of relief. "That could have ended much worse for you." The young man nodded, his face still flushed. "I know," he mumbled. I didn't think he didn't look like. He trailed off, realizing how hollow his words sounded. Now the manager sighed. "Let this be a wake-up call for all of us. We're not just selling products, we're representing something much bigger. If we can't treat every person who walks through that door with respect, then we don't deserve their business." Later that day, one of the bystanders outside the boutique posted a short video of Keanu's visit on social media. The clip showing Keanu speaking to the staff with calm authority and leaving with his entourage was captioned, "Keanu Reeves just taught the world Allison. In humility, a true class act." Within hours, the video had gone viral. Millions of people shared and commented, praising Keanu for his grace and integrity. This is why we love Keanu. We imagine judging someone like him by their clothes, shameful. But such a powerful lesson. He's not just an actor, he's a role model. As the story spread, news outlets picked it up, and soon, the boutique found itself at the center of public scrutiny. Reporters reached out for comments, and the store's PR team scrambled to control the narrative in the boutique's back office. The manager held a meeting with the entire staff. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily on everyone in the room. Let's not sugarcoat this, the manager began, her tone firm. We messed up, and now the whole world knows it. She looked directly at the salesperson who had confronted Keanu. You made a mistake, but so did all of us. This isn't just about one incident, it's about a culture we need to change. The salesperson nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'm really sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to, I know. The manager interrupted, but intent doesn't erase impact. We're going to use this as an opportunity to do better. Starting tomorrow, we'll be holding mandatory training on customer service and unconscious bias. We're also implementing a new policy: every customer is to be treated with the same level of respect regardless of appearance, background, or anything else. The staff exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others looking uneasy. And one more thing, the manager added, her voice softening slightly. We're lucky that Keanu Reeves is who he is, a kind, forgiving man. But we can't rely on luck to protect us from the consequences of our actions. Let's make sure this never happens again. Meanwhile, Keanu sat in his home, scrolling through the flood of messages he'd received. Since the incident, fans, friends, and strangers alike had reached out, sharing their own stories of being judged or dismissed because of their appearance. One message caught his eye. It was from a young woman who wrote, I've been treated like I'm invisible whole life because I don't look like I belong in fancy places. Thank you for standing up for people like me. Keanu smiled softly, his heart warmed by the message. Moments like this were why he believed so deeply in using his platform for good. Fame wasn't just a privilege, it was a responsibility. He typed a quick response. Thank you for sharing your story. Always remember, your worth isn't determined by what others see. It's defined by who you are. The next morning, Keanu released a statement on his social media accounts. It read, yesterday I had an experience that reminded me how important it is to treat everyone with kindness and respect. We all make assumptions, it's human nature, but those assumptions can hurt people in ways we don't always see. Let's challenge ourselves to be better. Let's lead with empathy. And let's remember that every person we meet has a story worth hearing. Thank you to everyone who has shared their thoughts and experiences with me. Together, we can create a world that values kindness above all else. The post quickly amassed millions of likes and comments, with people around the world echoing his sentiments within hours. The video had gone viral. Millions of people shared and commented, praising Keanu for his grace and integrity. This is why we love Keanu. Imagine judging someone like him by their clothes. Shameful, but such a powerful lesson. He's not just an actor. He's a role model. As the story spread, news outlets picked it up, and soon the boutique found itself at the center of public scrutiny. Reporters reached out for comments, and the store's PR team scrambled to control the narrative in the boutique's back office. The manager held a meeting with the entire staff. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the day's events pressing heavily on everyone in the room. Let's not sugarcoat this, the manager began, her tone firm. We messed up, and now the whole world knows it. She looked directly at the salesperson who had confronted Keanu. You made a mistake, but so did all of us. This isn't just about one incident. It's about a culture we need to change. The salesperson nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. I'm really sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to. I know, the manager interrupted. But intent doesn't erase impact. We're going to use this as an opportunity to do better. Starting tomorrow, we'll be holding mandatory training on customer service and unconscious bias. We're also implementing a new policy: every customer is to be treated with the same level of respect, regardless of appearance, background, or anything else. The staff exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others looking uneasy. And one more thing, the manager added, her voice softening slightly. We're lucky that Keanu Reeves is who he is, a kind, forgiving man. But we can't rely on luck to protect us from the consequences of our actions. Let's make sure this never happens again. Meanwhile, Keanu sat in his home scrolling through the flood of messages he'd received since the IGE incident. Fans, friends, and strangers alike had reached out, sharing their own stories of being judged or dismissed because of their appearance. One message caught his eye. It was from a young woman who wrote, "I've been treated like I'm invisible my whole life, because I don't look like I belong in fancy places. Thank you for standing up for people like me." Keanu smiled softly. His heart warmed by the message. Moments like this were why he believed so deeply in using his platform for good. Fame wasn't just a privilege, it was a responsibility. He typed a quick response, "Thank you for sharing your story. Always remember, your worth isn't determined by what others see. It's defined by who you are." The next morning, Keanu released a statement on his social media accounts. It read, "Yesterday I had an experience that reminded me how important it is to treat everyone with kindness and respect. We all make assumptions. It's human nature. But those assumptions can hurt people in ways we don't always see. Let's challenge ourselves. To be better, let's lead with empathy. And let's remember that every person we meet has a story worth hearing. Thank you to everyone who has shared their thoughts and experiences with me. Together, we can create a world that values kindness above all else." The post quickly amassed millions of likes and comments, with people around the world echoing his sentiments. Under the weight of public pressure, and inspired by Keanu's actions, the boutique decided to turn the incident into a learning opportunity. They partnered with local charities and began hosting events to promote inclusivity and kindness. The store's management also invited Keanu to visit again, this time as a guest of honor at a charity gala they were hosting. Keanu, true to his nature, accepted the invitation not out of vanity, but because he believed in supporting the cause. At the gala, the salesperson who had judged Keanu approached him with visible nervousness. "Mr. Reeves," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I just want to thank you not just for forgiving me, but for teaching me something I'll never forget. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. "Growth starts with acknowledgement," he said. "What matters now is how you move forward. Keep treating people with kindness and you'll make a difference." The incident became more than just a viral story. It sparked conversations around the world about the importance of respect and empathy. People shared their own experiences, challenged their assumptions, and committed to treating others with greater kindness. For Keanu, it was never about making headlines or being praised. It was about planting a seed, a reminder that even in the smallest interactions we have the power to create change. As he left the gala that night, Keanu couldn't help but smile. The watch he had originally planned to buy might not have made it to its intended recipient, but the lesson that came from it had reached countless people. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all. The story of Keanu Reeves's encounter at the boutique continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways no one could have anticipated. Social media remained ablaze with discussions, not just about Keanu's grace and wisdom, but also about the deeper issues of prejudice and the way society often values appearances over substance. Amid the online storm, people began sharing their own stories of being judged unfairly. A college student recounted how she was turned away from a job interview because her clothes weren't professional enough. Even though she had worked tirelessly to afford the most polished outfit, she could. A retired veteran wrote about the time he was ignoring order to dealership because he wasn't dressed in designer brands. These stories weren't just anecdotes, they were windows into the silent struggles so many people faced, and Keanu's example became a rallying cry for change. The boutique's corporate office was not immune to the backlash. Sitting in their glass-walled conference room, the executives pored over reports of the incident, the viral posts, and the public reaction. "This is a PR nightmare," one executive said, scrolling through an endless stream of negative comments online. "If we don't act fast, this could damage our reputation permanently." "But it's more than just PR," another chimed in. "This is about our core values. If this is how people perceive us, elitist, judgmental, then we've already failed." The room fell silent for a moment, as they all absorbed the weight of the situation. Finally, the CEO, a composed woman in her 50s with an air of authority, broke the silence. "We need to do better, not just to save face, but because it's the right thing to do. This isn't just one employee's mistake, it's a reflection of our culture. Let's turn this into an opportunity to redefine who we're over the next few weeks." The company launched a series of initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity and respect. They rolled out mandatory training programs across all stores, emphasizing the importance of empathy and understanding. They also partnered with non-profit organizations to support underprivileged communities, donating a portion of their profits to causes that aligned with their renewed mission. Back at the boutique, the young salesperson who had judged Keanu was on his own journey of growth. The incident had shaken him to his core, forcing him to confront not only his actions, but also the biases he hadn't even realized he carried. One afternoon during a break, he sat down with a colleague, his expression reflective. "Can I ask you something?" he began, hesitantly. "Sure," his colleague replied, leaning back in her chair. "Have you ever judged someone like I did with Mr. Reeves without even meaning to?" She nodded slowly. "I think we all have in one way or another, but what matters is what we do when we realize it. You're trying to learn from this, and that says a lot." He nodded, though his guilt lingered. "I just feel like I let everyone down, the store, the team, myself." His colleague placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We all make mistakes. What defines us is how we move forward. You've already taken the first step by owning up to it." Her words stayed with him, determined to change. He threw himself into the training sessions, asking questions, seeking feedback, and reflecting deeply on his interactions with customers. Slowly but surely, he began to see the world and himself through a new lens. A few weeks after the incident, Keanu decided to return to the boutique, not to make another grand statement, but to check in quietly and see if the lesson had truly taken root. Dressed once again in his usual casual attire, he stepped through the doors of the store. This time there was no hesitation from the staff. The young salesperson from before greeted him with genuine warmth, his demeanor entirely transformed. "Welcome back, sir," he said, his smile sincere. "It's an honor to have you here." Keanu nodded, his own smile. "Kind, thank you. It's good to see you again." Again, as they spoke, the salesperson didn't just sell a product, he connected, sharing insights about the items Keanu was interested in and listening attentively to his preferences. When Keanu finally made a purchase, the young man handed him the bag with a small but heartfelt comment. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. It means more than I can say." Keanu looked at him, his eyes warm with understanding. "We all deserve second chances. What matters is what we do with them." News of Keanu's quiet return and the changes at the boutique spread once again, reigniting conversations about the power of humility, forgiveness, and growth. This time, the story wasn't about a mistake. It was about transformation. People who had initially condemned the boutique began to praise its efforts to make amends. Customers who had avoided the store returned, drawn not just by its products, but by its renewed commitment to respect and inclusivity for Keanu. The incident was just one small chapter in his life, but its impact was far-reaching. As he sat in his home one evening, reading through letters and messages from people inspired by the story, he couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of fulfillment. Change didn't happen overnight, and it didn't come from grand gestures alone. It came from the everyday choices people made, the choice to listen, to reflect, to grow. And as the world continued to learn from his example, Keanu Reeves remained, as always, a testament to the simple yet profound truth that kindness is the greatest gift we can give. Weeks turned into months, and the boutique that had once been the center of public outrage began to thrive under its renewed mission. The changes implemented after Keanu Reeves's visit weren't just superficial. They were deeply felt by the staff and even by the customers. A young salesperson, now carrying himself with a renewed sense of purpose, became a symbol of the transformation. Customers who had witnessed his growth shared their experiences on social media, describing how he had gone above and beyond to make them feel welcome and valued. One particularly heartwarming post came from a single mother who wrote, "I walked into that boutique just to browse, knowing I couldn't afford anything, but the staff treated me like I mattered. They let my daughter try on a scarf and even gave her a little gift bag. I left without buying anything, but I left feeling seen and respected. That's priceless. Stories like hers began to multiply, creating a ripple effect that drew more people to the boutique, not for its luxury goods, but for the humanity it now embodied. Keanu's story continued to inspire people across industries. At a corporate conference in New York, a prominent CEO referenced the incident in his keynote speech. "We all know the story of Keanu Reeves," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "But let's not just admire it, let's learn from it. Kindness and respect shouldn't be luxuries in how we treat others. They should be the foundation of everything we do." The audience erupted into applause, and in the days that followed, companies began re-evaluating their customer service policies, with some even reaching out to Keanu's team for advice on fostering a culture of respect and empathy. Keanu, ever humble, declined the offers to become a formal advisor, but he did take the time to write back to several companies, encouraging them to focus on creating environments where every person, employee, or customer felt valued. Among the many lives impacted by the story, one stood out in particular: a high school teacher in a small Midwestern town. Inspired by Keanu's actions, she decided to integrate a new lesson into her curriculum. Standing in front of her class one morning, she wrote 3 words on the board: judgment, respect, kindness. "Today, we're going to talk about these 3 things," she said, turning to face her students. "I want you to think about a time when someone judged you unfairly, or when you might have judged someone else. How did it feel? And what could you have done differently?" The discussion that followed was transformative. Students shared deeply personal stories, some of them tearfully recounting moments when they felt invisible or excluded. Others spoke of their regrets over making assumptions about their peers. The teacher ended the lesson with a challenge: the next time you see someone who looks different from you, or who doesn't seem to fit in, take a moment to connect, ask a question, offer a smile. You never know whose life you might change or whose story you might discover. Back at the boutique, the young salesperson continued to reflect on how much his life had changed since the encounter with Keanu Reeves. His newfound perspective wasn't just affecting his professional life, it was transforming his personal relationships as well. One evening, while having dinner with his family, he shared the story of what had happened. "I thought I was doing my job," admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "But I was really just protecting my own assumptions, my own calm meeting. Mr. Reeves made me realize how much I'd been missing, how many opportunities to connect with people I'd let slip by." His father, a man of few words, nodded thoughtfully. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong," he said, "but it takes even more courage to change." Those words stayed with him. Over the next few months, he found himself seeking out opportunities to connect with people in ways he never had before. He volunteered at local shelters, helped organize community events, and even mentored new hires at the boutiques, sharing his story as a lesson in humility and growth. While the boutique thrived and the world continued to reflect on the lessons of the incident, Keanu remained as grounded as ever. One quiet afternoon, he made an unannounced visit to a homeless shelter in downtown Los Angeles, one of the charities he had supported with the watches he purchased. Walking into the shelter, he was greeted warmly by the staff, who were thrilled to see him. But Keanu wasn't there for fanfare. He was there to connect. He spent hours talking to the residents, listening to their stories and sharing some of his own. He didn't just offer words of encouragement. He offered his time, his presence, and his unwavering belief in their worth. One man, a former musician who had fallen on hard times, thanked Keanu for his generosity. "You don't know how much this means to us," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Keanu placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "You matter," he said simply. "And you're not alone." As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of Keanu's actions showed no signs of slowing. From boardrooms to classrooms, from luxury boutiques to homeless shelters, the lesson remained the same: kindness and respect have the power to change lives. Keanu, true to his nature, didn't dwell on the incident for him. It wasn't about the headlines or the praise. It was about living his values and inspiring others to do the same. And in a world often consumed by appearances and assumptions, his quiet example served as a beacon of hope, a reminder that the simplest acts of kindness can create waves of change. Would you like the next section, part 6, to focus on broader societal impacts or delve deeper into specific personal transformations influenced by the event? Let me know, as Keanu's story continued to inspire a broader conversation, began to take shape in society. Social media had turned his quiet act of kindness into a global moment, but its true power lay in the personal reflections. It sparked communities, companies, and individuals began to examine their own biases and assumptions, challenging themselves to approach the world with greater empathy. Television networks hosted panels discussing the incident, inviting psychologists, business leaders, and community organizers to weigh in. One psychologist noted, "What makes this story so powerful is its simplicity." We all recognize ourselves in these moments, either as the one who judges or as the only being judged. Keanu Reeves reminded us that kindness isn't just an ideal, it's a choice we can make every day. A prominent business magazine published an article titled, "The Keanu Effect: How One Encounter Redefined Luxury and Inclusivity." The article praised not only Keanu's actions, but also the boutique's willingness to turn a mistake into an opportunity for growth. Inspired by the story, grassroots movements began to emerge, encouraging people to examine their assumptions and lead with kindness. A campaign called "See the Person, Not the Appearance" gained traction online, with thousands of people sharing their stories of breaking through barriers of judgment. One particularly touching post came from a barista in Seattle who wrote, "A regular customer of mine always came in wearing the same old coat and carrying a beat-up bag. I thought he was just scraping by, but one day he handed me a huge tip and said, 'Thanks for being kind.' It's not easy finding that these days. Turns out he's a retired doctor who volunteers full-time at a free clinic. I learned a valuable lesson. People are more than what you see." The campaign quickly grew. Beyond social media, cities organized events where participants spent a day volunteering in communities they might otherwise overlook: homeless shelters, food banks, and senior centers. The message was clear: everyone deserves to feel valued regardless of their circumstances. Back at the boutique, the staff had fully embraced their new philosophy. The store became a symbol of inclusivity, with a welcoming atmosphere that drew in a more diverse clientele. The young salesperson, now one of the boutique's rising stars, took on a mentorship role, helping new hires understand the importance of treating every customer with respect. One day during a team meeting, he shared his story. "I used to think my job was just about selling luxury products," he said, his voice steady. "But Mr. Reeves taught me that it's about so much more. It's about creating an experience where everyone feels valued. That's what keeps people coming back. Not the price tags, but the way we make them feel." His words resonated deeply with the team, solidifying the boutique's commitment to its new values. While the world continued to buzz about the incident, Keanu quietly moved forward as he always did. But he wasn't done making an impact. He began funding a project aimed at providing professional attire for people in need, partnering with nonprofits to create pop-up shops where individuals could find clothing for job interviews, court appearances, or other significant life events. The project was aptly named "Everyone Belongs," a nod to the lesson Keanu had embodied during his visit to the boutique. At one of the pop-up events, Keanu made a surprise appearance. As he walked through the rows of neatly arranged clothes, he stopped to talk with attendees, listening to their stories and offering words of encouragement. One young woman who had recently escaped an abusive relationship tearfully thanked him. "You don't know what this means to me," she said, clutching a blazer she'd picked out for an upcoming interview. "For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a chance." Keanu's response was simple, but heartfelt. "You've always had a chance," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you of it now. Go show them who you are." Keanu's project caught the attention of other celebrities who reached out to offer their support. Soon, Everyone Belonged expanded beyond clothing, offering workshops on resume building, interview skills, and financial literacy. At a press event for the project, Keanu spoke briefly, his words carrying the same quiet power that had defined the entire journey. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about all of us. We all have the ability to make someone's life a little better, whether it's through a kind word, a small gesture, or just by treating them with respect. And when we do that, we create ripples of change that go far beyond what we can see." His words were met with thunderous applause, but Keanu, ever humble, simply nodded and stepped aside, letting the focus shift back to the people the project was helping. As the months went by, the incident at the boutique faded from the headlines, but its impact continued to grow. For many, it became a touchstone, a reminder that every interaction holds the potential to uplift or diminish. Keanu Reeves, meanwhile, remained as grounded and generous as ever. He didn't dwell on the past or seek recognition for his efforts. Instead, he continued to live by the values he held dear, quietly making the world a better place, one act of kindness at a time. And for the millions of people who had been touched by his story, one thing was certain: the lesson Keanu had shared wasn't just about him. It was about all of us and the power we have to create a kinder, more compassionate world. Would you like me to continue with Part 7, focusing on the long-term societal shifts or more intimate individual stories of transformation? Let me know. Years had passed since Keanu Reeves's transformative encounter at the luxury boutique, but the story had woven itself into the fabric of modern culture. It became more than just a viral moment. It became a parable for empathy, humility, and the power of small actions. Universities included the story in ethics and leadership courses, citing ETAs, an example of how influence doesn't require authority, but authenticity. Professors would begin lectures with a simple question: what would you do if someone underestimated you, and how would you handle it with grace? Meanwhile, in workplaces around the globe, managers used the story as a training tool. It was no longer just about customer service. It was about cultivating an environment where people were seen and valued for who they were, not what they appeared to be. One CEO shared in a keynote speech, "The lesson Keanu Reeves taught us wasn't about luxury or even business. It was about humanity. We live in a world that often judges too quickly, but what if we paused? What if we led with curiosity instead of assumptions? Imagine the world we could create." The luxury boutique, once at the center of controversy, had become a symbol of redemption and growth. Its commitment to inclusivity and respect had reshaped its brand identity, drawing in a new wave of loyal customers. In a surprising twist, the boutique partnered with Keanu Reeves's Everyone Belongs initiative, dedicating a percentage of its annual profits to funding professional attire and career training for underserved communities. One year, during the holiday season, the boutique hosted an event called Style for All. It invited people from all walks of life, students, veterans, single parents, and more, to shop for free in a curated collection of high-end items. The young salesperson who had once judged Keanu now led the event with pride, ensuring every guest felt welcome and valued. "This isn't just about clothes," he told a reporter. "It's about dignity. It's about reminding people that they deserve to be here just as much as anyone else." Despite the widespread attention and accolades, Keanu Reeves remained steadfast in his humility. For him, the boutique encounter was just one moment in a lifelong journey of living with intention and kindness. He continued to support Everyone Belongs while quietly funding other charitable projects. His philosophy was simple: the world didn't need grand gestures to change it, needed consistent, meaningful actions. One particularly touching moment came when Keanu visited a school in a low-income neighborhood. Standing in front of a group of young students, he shared a piece of advice that had guided him through his own challenges. "Don't let anyone tell you your worth is defined by what they see. Your worth is who you are, how you treat others, and the way you rise after every fall." The students listened, intent, inspired by the sincerity of his words. One afternoon, while walking through Los Angeles, Keanu found himself in an unplanned moment of connection. He stopped at a small food truck for a quick bite, where a man working behind the counter recognized him immediately. "You're Keanu Reeves?" the man said, his voice a mix of awe and excitement. Keanu nodded with a warm smile. That's Me, the man hesitated, then spoke, his tone shifting. I just want to thank you. A couple of years ago, I saw that video of you at the boutique. It hit me hard because I've been judged my whole life for how I look, but seeing how you handled it, it gave me the courage to stand tall and not let it get to me. Keanu's smile deepened. I'm glad it meant something to you. You deserve respect always. The man handed Keanu his order, then paused before adding, and now I try to treat everyone with that same respect, just like you did. It's funny how one moment can change so much. Keanu thanked him, the simplicity of the exchange reaffirming what he'd always believed. The smallest actions often had the greatest impact. The lessons from Keanu's story continued to ripple outward, sparking initiatives far beyond what anyone could have predicted in Europe. A luxury hotel chain launched a program called Hospitality for All training staff to treat every guest with equal care and attention. In Asia, a major retail brand created a campaign celebrating the diversity of its customers using the tagline, "You belong here." One particularly moving project emerged in South America, where communities began organizing kindness days. On these days, volunteers performed random acts of kindness, cleaning parks, delivering meals, or simply offering words of encouragement to strangers. For Keanu, the lasting impact of the boutique incident wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about the lives it touched, the perspectives it shifted, and the conversations it started. One evening, while reflecting on everything that had unfolded, Keanu shared a rare thought with a close friend. It's funny, isn't it, that something so small, a moment of judgment, a simple response, could grow into all of this. It's humbling to see how much kindness matters, even when it feels like the world isn't paying attention. His friend nodded. That's because it's not just kindness. It's you, the way you live it, the way you believe in it. People see that, and they want to follow your example. Keanu smiled softly. Then maybe that's the real lesson. It's not about me. It's about what we can all do every day to make this world a little better. As the years passed, Keanu's story remained a touchstone for those seeking inspiration, from classrooms to boardrooms, from social media campaigns to quiet moments of connection. It continued to remind the world of the power of kindness, humility, and respect. And while Keanu himself never sought the spotlight, his actions spoke louder than words, leaving an indelible mark on hearts and minds around the globe. Because in the end, it wasn't just about a luxury boutique or a viral moment. It was about the kind of world we could create, one act of kindness at a time. The story of Keanu Reeves and the boutique incident found its way into unexpected places: children's books, motivational talks, and even school curriculums. Teachers across the globe began sharing the story as an example of how kindness and humility could change lives. In one classroom in Brooklyn, New York, a group of middle school students sat attentively as their teacher told them about Keanu's experience. Now, what do we learn from this? The teacher asked, scanning the room. A boy in the back raised his hand. That you shouldn't judge people by how they look, he said confidently. Exactly, the teacher replied. But what else? A girl sitting near the front chimed in. That even if someone treats you badly, you don't have to be mean. Bad, you can show them a better way. The teacher smiled, nodding. That's right. And remember, it's not just about being kind when someone is watching. It's about doing it because it's the right thing to do. The students left that lesson with something far more valuable than any textbook knowledge, an understanding of the power they held to make the world a little kinder, one interaction at a time. Inspired by the story, a 16-year-old girl named Maya from Los Angeles decided to start a campaign at her school. She called it See Beyond the Surface, a movement encouraging students to look past appearances and treat everyone with respect. Maya printed posters with the campaign slogan and placed them around campus. She also organized events where students shared stories about times they felt judged or underestimated and how they overcame those moments. At one these events, a shy freshman named Carlos stood up to speak. His hands trembled as he held them. Microphone. "Are you used to be scared to come to school because people made fun of me for my clothes?" he said quietly. "But hearing about this campaign made me feel like I belong here, like I matter." The room erupted into applause, and Maya's heart swelled with pride. Her small idea had grown into something much bigger. A community where kindness and understanding thrived. Meanwhile, at a prestigious business school in Boston, Keanu's story had become a case study in leadership. A professor used the incident to teach students about the importance of empathy and integrity in the corporate world. What made Keanu's actions so impactful? The professor asked during a lecture. A student raised his hand because he didn't just talk about kindness, he lived it. He could have used his power to punish the store, but instead he used it to teach a lesson. The professor nodded. Exactly. True leadership isn't about dominance or authority. It's about inspiring others to be better. Not through words, but through actions. The students left the lecture hall that day with a new perspective on what it meant to lead, not just in business, but in life. In the wake of Keanu's growing influence, a group of young entrepreneurs came together to launch a global initiative called the Kindness Network. Their goal was simple: to connect people from all walks of life through acts of compassion and empathy. The initiative encouraged participants to share their stories of kindness online, creating a digital tapestry of hope and inspiration. Each story was mapped on an interactive globe, showing the far-reaching impact of these small, everyday actions. One story that stood out came from a farmer in India who shared how a stranger helped him rebuild his home after a devastating flood. Another came from a nurse in Brazil who spoke about the joy of receiving a simple thank you from a patient on a particularly difficult day. As the network grew, it became more than just a collection of stories. It became a movement, a reminder that the world could change for the better, one kind act at a time. Though he never sought recognition, Keanu couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of pride as he watched these movements unfold sitting in his living room. One evening he scrolled through posts on the Kindness Network, his heart warmed by the stories of hope and humanity. One post in particular caught his eye. It was from a young boy in Africa who had started a community garden to provide food for struggling families. The boy wrote, "I saw a video about Keanu Reeves, and it made me think, what can I do to help? So I started to this garden. It's not much, but it's something." Keanu leaned back in his chair, a soft smile on his face. "It's everything," he said quietly to himself. The next generation, inspired by Keanu's actions, began to lead with kindness in their own lives. They started projects, challenged prejudices, and used their voices to advocate for empathy and understanding. In one particularly powerful moment, a group of high school students organized a march in their town, holding sun signs that read, "Kindness is strength," and "See the person, not the surface." Their message was clear. The lessons Keanu had shared weren't just for one store, one city, or one moment. They were for everyone, everywhere. Keanu Reeves' story continued to inspire long after the initial incident. For some, it was a reminder to be more compassionate in their daily lives. For others, it was a call to action, urging them to create lasting change in their communities. And for Keanu, it was simply a testament to the truth he had always believed: kindness isn't just a gift, it's a responsibility. And it's one we all share. As the world carried his lesson forward, it became clear that his actions had done more than spark a movement. They'd planted a seed of hope in a world that desperately needed it. As the years unfolded, the story of Keanu Reeves' act of quiet humility had grown into something far greater. A global tapestry of kindness. Governments, organizations, and individuals around the world took inspiration from the values his story represented, weaving them into the fabric of their communities. The Kindness Network, now an expansive platform, had grown into a thriving global community. Stories poured in daily from every corner of the world. A baker in Paris who gave free bread to struggling families, a teacher in Kenya who built a library for her students, and a taxi driver in Japan who provided free rides to hospital patients. The interactive globe that displayed these acts of kindness was now a symbol of hope, a visual reminder that no matter where you lived or who you were, the power to make a difference was universal. Recognizing the momentum created by this global movement, an international coalition of NOs and philanthropists came together to create the Kindness Summit. This annual event brought together changemakers from around the world to share Their stories, strategies, and visions for building a more compassionate world. At the inaugural summit, held in Geneva, the keynote speaker was none other than Keanu Reeves, standing on stage before a crowd of thousands. Keanu looked out at the audience, his demeanor calm but filled with purpose. "I'm not a politician," he began. "I'm not an activist or an expert. I'm just someone who believes in the power of kindness. What started as one moment in a boutique has become a movement I never could have imagined, but this isn't about me, it's about you. It's about every person who chooses to see beyond the surface, who chooses to lift someone up instead of tearing them down. That's where real change begins." His words were met with a standing ovation, but Keanu, ever humble, simply nodded and stepped back, allowing the spotlight to shine on the other speakers, teachers, doctors, community leaders whose work was changing lives in ways both big and small. One of the most touching moments at the summit came from a woman named Amina, a midwife from a rural village in Sudan. She shared how, inspired by Keanu's story, she had started a program to train young women in her community to become healthcare workers. "Kindness isn't just about words," she said, "it's about action. It's about using what you have to help those who have less, and when we do that, we create ripples that can reach places we never dreamed of." Amina's story resonated deeply with the audience and soon became a symbol of what the Kindness Summit stood for: ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The corporate world also took notice, inspired by the values highlighted in Keanu's story. Companies began integrating kindness into their business models. One tech giant launched a program called Code with Care, which provided free coding education to underprivileged youth. A luxury hotel chain introduced Stay with Kindness, offering free stays to families traveling for medical emergencies. Even the boutique, where the story began, had become a leader in corporate social responsibility. Its partnership with Everyone Belongs continued to flourish, and the store regularly hosted workshops on inclusivity for businesses across the industry. The CEO of the boutique, now a vocal advocate for social change, often spoke about how a single encounter had reshaped the company's mission. "We owe so much to Mr. Reeves," she said during a televised interview, "not just for his grace in that moment, but for the lesson he left us with. That every interaction is an opportunity to make the world a little better." Educational institutions also embraced the movement. Schools around the world introduced programs teaching students about empathy, respect, and the power of small acts of kindness. In one school in South Korea, a group of students started a project called Kindness Journals. Each student was given a journal to record acts of kindness they performed or witnessed at the end of the school year. They shared their stories. In a community celebration, one student wrote about helping a classmate who struggled with math. Another described how they stood up for a friend who was being bullied. Each story, no matter how small, was celebrated as a step toward creating a kinder, more inclusive world. Despite the global impact of his actions, Keanu Reeves remained as grounded as ever. He continued to support causes close to his heart, often in quiet, unpublicized ways. One evening, while sitting on a park bench in Los Angeles, Keanu watched as a group of children played nearby. Their laughter filled the air, a reminder of the simple joys that often went unnoticed. A passerby recognized him and approached hesitantly. "Excuse me, Mr. Reeves," the man said. "I just wanted to say thank you. Your story, it changed the way I see the world. I used to think small acts didn't matter, but now I see they're everything." Keanu smiled, his eyes warm with gratitude. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "The truth is, we all have the power to make a difference. Sometimes it's the smallest gesture that leave the biggest impact." The man nodded, moved by Keanu's words as he walked away. He couldn't help but feel inspired to carry that message forward. The kindness movement continued to grow, fueled by the stories of individuals who refuse to let cynicism overshadow compassion. From bustling cities to remote villages, the lesson Keanu had shared both in words and actions became a beacon of hope. In a world that often felt divided, for Keanu, the journey wasn't about creating a legacy. It was about living a truth he had always believed: that kindness, no matter how small, could create ripples that reached far beyond what anyone could imagine. And as the world carried that lesson forward, it became clear that the movement he had sparked was more than a moment. It was a testament to the power of humanity at its best. It was a quiet morning in Los Angeles, and Keanu Reeves found himself drawn back to the boutique where it all began. The story that had sparked global change conversations and movements was rooted in a simple moment, a moment that could have been forgotten if not for the choice he made to handle it with grace. Dressed in his signature casual attire, Keanu pushed open the door of the store. The familiar chime of the bell greeted him, and so did the warm smiles of the staff. Mr. Reeves, the manager who had been with the boutique through its transformation, approached him with genuine enthusiasm. "It's so good to see you again." Keanu nodded with a modest smile. "Good to be back. Thought I'd stop by and see how things are going." The manager gestured around the store, her pride evident. "Thanks to you, things have never been better. The boutique isn't just a business anymore, it's a place where people feel welcome, no matter who they are." As Keanu wandered through the store, he noticed subtle changes signs that celebrated inclusivity, staff who engaged warmly with every customer, and a sense of openness that hadn't existed before. At one point, Keanu found himself face to face with the young salesperson who had judged him all those years ago. The man's demeanor was different now. His confidence was grounded in kindness, not arrogance. "Mr. Reeves," the salesperson said, extending his hand. "I don't know if I've ever thanked you properly. What you did that day to changed my life." Keanu shook his hand, his smile reassuring. "You've already thanked me by growing from it. That's what matters." The young man hesitated, then added, "I used to think success was about looking the part, about fitting into some narrow idea of what mattered. But you taught me that real success is about how you treat people. It's a lesson I carry with me every day." Keanu nodded. "That's a lesson worth sharing. Keep passing it on later." As Keanu prepared to leave the boutique, a woman entered the store. With her young son, her clothes were simple, and she carried herself with quiet humility. She seemed hesitant, as if unsure whether she belonged in such a place. One of the sales associates greeted her warmly, offering assistance without a trace of judgment. Keanu watched as the woman's shoulders relaxed and her son's face lit up with excitement. As he explored the store for a moment, Keanu saw himself in that little boy, curious, hopeful, and full of potential. And he saw the ripple of kindness playing out before his eyes, touching lives in ways both visible and unseen. As he stepped out into the bright Los Angeles morning, Keanu felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The boutique had come full circle, and so had he. The ripple effects of Keanu's actions continued to shape the world, in communities everywhere. People were inspired to act with greater compassion, to challenge their assumptions, and to lead with empathy. A high school student in Chicago started a mentorship program for younger kids who felt out of place. A farmer in Australia began inviting struggling neighbors to his land, sharing his resources and knowledge to help them rebuild. And in a small village in Ghana, a teacher used Keanu's story to teach her students about respect, dignity, and the importance of treating everyone as equals. For Keanu, the journey wasn't about being remembered. It was about the simple, quiet hope that his actions might inspire others to make better choices. One evening, as he sat in his garden watching the sun dip below the horizon, a thought crossed his mind. The world is too big to change all at once. But if you can change one moment, one interaction, one life, that's enough. That's how the world changes. His phone buzzed with a notification. It was from the Kindness Network, now a global hub for sharing stories of humanity and hope. A new post had gone live, featuring a young man from India who had built a free medical clinic in his village. The post was tagged with a simple phrase, "Inspired by Keanu Reeves." Keanu smiled, his heart full. The ripple was still growing, carried forward by countless hands, countless hearts, countless acts of kindness. The boutique incident had become more than just a story. It was a symbol, a reminder that even the smallest actions could spark waves of change. And while the world continued to grow and evolve, one truth remained constant: kindness is a gift that keeps giving. And as Keanu Reeves quietly lived his life, continuing to spread that gift in ways both big and small, He proved that the most extraordinary legacies are built not on fame or fortune, but on the simple, powerful choice to lead with love. This concludes the journey of Keanu Reeves and the ripple of kindness. Let me know if you'd like any part expanded or a specific focus on individual stories inspired by this legacy.